In this video, we're going to talk about the full story behind one of Marvel's weirdest villains, the creature only known as Hive. Who is Hive? When it comes to Hive, it's more of a matter of asking what it is rather than who it is. That's because, as the name suggests, Hive is pretty much a collective that forms a singular entity. But that's just the beginning. Made up of thousands of wriggling parasitic creatures, Hive latches itself onto its chosen host, taking control of nearly every aspect of its being. Now, what makes Hive stand out from other parasitic hive minds in comics is the fact that it isn't necessarily portrayed like an undead, mindless zombie whose sole purpose is to consume. You know what we're talking about, and we've seen it in tons of comics in the past. Instead, it manages to become an independent, conscious individual entity once it fuses with a host. Hive isn't treated like the grotesque, Lovecraftian monster that he is. In fact, it's pretty much revered as sort of an icon within certain circles of the Marvel universe. But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves here. As far as Hive's power set goes, well, it's just as disgusting as his appearance. To be specific, what could be considered as Hive's quote-unquote signature superpower is his ability to simply launch parts of itself towards a target. That's right, no fancy lightning from Asgard, no sky beams, it's just some eldritch creature with a tentacle-beard launching lumps of its flesh at you. Aside from decent projectile weapons, Hive's projectiles are what you might call its method of propagating its consciousness. Simply put, there's a chance that you could become part of, well, Hive's Hive if one of its pieces latches onto you. On top of that, Hive also possesses one uncanny quality that makes it relatively more formidable than your average brood-themed monster, and that is the ability to bring someone back to life. And that's kind of an overstatement really, because it's more appropriate to say that Hive has the power to possess any lifeless body and turn it into his own puppet, memories and all. But make no mistake, it's not like being possessed by Hive would instantly turn anyone into a beefed up monstrosity. In fact, it's this creature's same ability that serves as its glaring weakness. You see, Hive more or less takes on the attributes of anyone it takes control of. That means it gets everything from its hosts. And we mean everything. Hive doesn't have the capability to pick and choose which of its host qualities it wants to inherit. So, in the simplest terms, it's a creature who's strictly limited by the host it possesses. For example, Hive could possess any ordinary guy off the street, and in turn, it would only have the strength levels of that host. Hive has also been shown to be an amphibious creature that has the capability to breathe on land and in water. But what Hive lacks in combat capabilities, it more than makes up for in reputation. Like we said earlier, Hive is treated like an icon, the birth of a monster. Contrary to its looks, Hive isn't some eldritch demigod who's been lying at the bottom of the ocean before its emergence in the wider Marvel universe. Instead, it's a science experiment, and one that didn't go horribly wrong either. So yeah, that's simply our way of saying that the maniacs who created Hive intended it to be one gruesome monster. To be specific, Hive was created by Hydra. Hive was given life for the sole purpose of creating a creature that embodies all of Hydra's core ideals. Now, Hive was initially an experiment spearheaded by a Hydra head honcho named the Kraken. Now, the Kraken was sort of this legendary recruiter for the criminal organization, which explains why he wanted to craft an abomination that stood for Hydra's core ideals. It would take years before Hive's project was finished, and the final ingredient that they needed to bring it to completion was a host. So for this, Hydra decided to pull one of their nameless henchmen to serve as Hive's very first host, which in turn would bring the creature to life. Now, this poor Hydra soldier was as average as it goes. He didn't have any superhuman abilities, much less a name. On top of that, Kraken and his team specifically chose this guy because of his health issues he had. You see, this nameless Hydra goon had a certain blood disorder and was diabetic, which made Hydra think that he'd be the perfect host for Hive. Oh, and it's not so that they could see whether Hive could cure these conditions. The fact that its host had these medical issues actually made him Hive's perfect host, since it meant that it would be easy for the creature to take over his body. Now, it wouldn't have made much sense if, say, Hydra didn't vet the guy before serving him up to Hive. That would have meant it was just a classic clerical error on Hydra's part. But to handpick someone with a blood disorder and diabetes to act as the host for the creature that's supposed to represent your company's core values, yeah, that's a bit of a design flaw. Maybe a few more years in the lab would have done Hive project better. Everything seemed to work out fine for Hive at first. Once brought to life, Hive proved itself to be capable, cunning, and intelligent. In fact, Hive's status within Hydra was so revered that it even had its own language that only other Hydra members could understand. On a side note, whether Hydra developed Hive's language or vice versa is something that wasn't made explicitly clear in the comics. But more to the point, Hive was immediately given prestige within Hydra's inner circle the moment he came to life. He was immediately assigned to be part of the organization's High Council right from the get-go. This effectively gave Hive's status within Hydra's ranks a position that it only shared with the likes of the other Hydra heavy hitters like the Kraken, the Viper, the Gorgon, and the Madame Hydra herself. A gross development. Now, there are a couple of important things you should take note of during Hive's tenure as part of Hydra's High Council. First, there was the fact that Madame Hydra wasn't really who she said she was. You see, the OG Madame Hydra was none other than Ophelia Sarkisson, who also went by her more well-known codename Viper. During this period, though, Contessa Valentina Allegra de Fontaine impersonated Ophelia to worm her way into Hydra's High Council. Second, it was also during this period that Hydra was fighting with another shady organization called Leviathan. Now, we won't go into too much detail about this organization, but to give you an idea, it's basically a Soviet version of Hydra. Now, if you only know Valentina from the MCU, there's a chance you're not aware that she's also one of Marvel Universe's most formidable spies. Now, she would eventually reveal her true identity as a Leviathan spy to the OG Madame Hydra, Ophelia. Of course, information like this couldn't just be left out in the open, and given that Allegra isn't just a dummy, she promptly took out Ophelia the moment she learned of her true identity and motives. This is where Hive comes in, as the creature would possess Ophelia's lifeless body, which then effectively brought her back to life. She would then take on Allegra's place within the Hydra High Council afterwards. Say what you will, but Hive definitely traded up when it decided to possess Ophelia's dead body. For one, instead of looking like a typical eldritch abomination, Hive turned into a very good-looking female with a tentacle head that would make anyone who's into that sort of thing squeal with joy. For another, Hive didn't have to deal with his old host's medical issues, but this upgrade was short-lived, as Ophelia and Hive would undergo a procedure that would medically separate them without taking her life. Not long after that, Hydra would experience a shakeup when its High Council beefed with one another. Specifically, the Ophelia and the Gorgon decided to betray Baron Stryker, which basically fractured Hydra from within. From there, Hive would align itself with the Gorgon and operate from an underwater Hydra facility. This wouldn't be for too long though, as Nick Fury and his secret warriors ended up laying siege to it shortly after. What ensued was a heated battle between Hive-controlled Hydra lackeys and the secret warriors that ultimately resulted in a costly victory for Fury's side. An entire cell of the secret warriors called Grey Team ended up sacrificing themselves in order to destroy the Hydra base and Hive along with it. But in true superhero comic fashion, no one ever really dies. So we eventually found out that Hive survived its encounter with the secret warriors when a woman named Elisa Sinclair discovered the creature in a crypt somewhere in Egypt. Now, Elisa also happened to be yet another character to take on the Madame Hydra mantle. As such, she also had the bright idea of re-establishing the organization's High Council. Soon after, we discover that Hive had become the acting head of another criminal organization, the Hand, during Marvel's Secret Empire event. During this period, Hive operated out of Madripoor with his former fellow High Council mate, the Gorgon. But again, this was short-lived, as Hive would be taken down by Tony Stark, or to be more specific, Stark's own personally crafted AI.